Hi, I'm Mallory Hurlbert, and I'm the Learning Resource Director at Bishop Miege High School in Roland Park, Kansas. I'm so excited to be here today and share with you how we built our peer mentor program here at Miege. Before we head into those details, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Previous to this role, I worked as a school social worker in a public school setting. I always wanted to support students at a higher level. I had a small caseload as a social worker and knew I could make a bigger impact if I had a larger population to work with. I decided to go back to school and got my master's in educational leadership with an emphasis on special and inclusive education. This degree led me to the opportunity here at Bishop Miege High School, my alma mater, to build an inclusive environment. I knew from working in the public school setting that resources in a private school could be limited, specifically in support staff. I began researching how I could provide an opportunity for our students to have that support, but also foster independence, growth, and opportunity. In this presentation, I will walk you through my year-long timeline from planning to implementation that will provide you with ideas, resources, and an opportunity for future collaboration. My hope is that you will take away a piece of this presentation and begin to envision how you too can support your students using peer mentors. Thank you. As you can see, the planning to implementation took me an entire year. Today, I'm going to walk you through each portion of this planning period and provide you with the insight and the resources that helped me along my way. To be able to do this, I have a website that I've prepared that will house all items that I discuss, where you will be able to make your own editable copy. Additionally, on this website, you will find resources, both free and paid, as well as student reflections, which may be used for viewing purposes only. The website is sites.google.com/view/NCEA peer mentoring. In the fall of 2019, I began my initial planning phase. I started to think of the needs in our building. Some of the questions I began to ask myself were there students who would benefit from peer mentors? Am I already able to support all the students in my building? Do we have social gatherings of peers of all abilities? And are there specific courses or teachers that may need more support than others? Looking to specific courses and teachers was one that really stood out in our building. We have a lot of large class sizes where an extra set of hands could be beneficial to the students, as well as low phase courses that are able to be adjusted to the needs in the classroom, where more individualized support would be useful. During this phase, I also started to communicate with my stakeholders. I spoke with administration, ensuring that this was a program they would allow in the building. I spoke with our counselors, faculty, and families and got an understanding of what their needs were within this program. And I looked to other local and national programs to decide if there was anything that I could mirror our program at Miege after. When looking at those programs, I thought about how were their peer mentors used? Do we have the same need in our building that they had? How do you apply for this program? Are mentors able to sign up for one class? Is it a certain class period, or is it something that could be used across our day? And then what are those expectations that are already in place in other programs? The time commitment, the training, different attendance, discipline, confidentiality expectations. And lastly, speaking really closely with registrars and how their credit hours looked. I wanted to make sure that this program was something that our students would be able to use towards their graduation credits, but also one that they looked forward to and that could potentially help them on different college applications or scholarship needs. Now we've got the basis of our logistics in place. We're about 9 months out from implementation, and we begin to look at what's next. So here's when we start to create things like our course description, the expectations of our mentors, thinking about assignments, finals, are we meeting on a regular basis? Looking into COVID, there's different expectations for each mode of learning, if you're at home versus in the classroom, or maybe we're in a hybrid setting. And then also the confidentiality. I have links to some samples for you on the website if you'd like to check those out. Additionally, we needed to look at expectations of faculty. It was huge to me to make sure that the faculty knew that these peer mentors were not teacher aides. They were not there to grade papers. They were not there to be support to just them. They were there for the whole class and really to be the support to their peers. And then again, reaching out and being able to communicate, but also create a confidentiality form for our families. We want them to feel safe and understand that the peer mentors are there to support, but also not to share their information regarding their student. I also have a link to the confidentiality form that I sent to parents. We're continuing to communicate with our faculty, our students. I went into all of our theology classes for our sophomores and juniors. So for the implementation year, they would be the juniors and seniors in the building. And I gave them a description of what this course was and what it meant. I also provided them with a facts sheet so that some of their most common questions could be answered, and let them know where I was available for future communication or questions that they had. And then I also communicated a lot to our families, current and future. We have an open house every year, so that was a big discussion point with some of our incoming freshmen or even some seventh graders that come through and are looking for a spot for their student who has different accommodations and supports in place. We put some information into our newsletter, and then I updated our website to make sure that parents knew that this was an opportunity not only for their students who wanted to be a mentor, but also for our students that maybe needed that extra support in the classroom. And finally, just collaborating again. So we updated the portals with our registrar to make sure that we had a course created for registration. We start looking at that process as soon as we come back from winter break. And so I needed to make sure that we had all of our description entered, our credit hours correct, what students were able to be registered into that class, and then how we would go about applying, submitting, and approving those students once they've pre-registered. And again, I just want to take a minute to note that on the website that I showed you at the beginning, and I will restate at the end of this presentation, there are links to all of the materials that I discuss. There's templates for each stage of my planning period, as well as links to the materials that I used in each of those stages. So we're now in the spring of 2020, so still about 6 months out from implementation. And this is where I was really able to begin creating those key details of the course. So looking at specific dates and times for orientation, determining how much time we would need, where would we hold that. I do have an application process for my mentors. So I began looking at that as well and creating that application, which was a simple Google form and the pieces that I needed to be aware of in order to make an informed decision on their acceptance into this course. Some of those key details within that application included ways to contact them during the summer, different levels of preference in courses. I didn't want to put students in an English class if that was something that they themselves struggle in and don't look forward to going to every day. I wanted to make sure that they were interested and excited about the courses that they were supporting. And it was really beneficial, and I've gained a lot of good feedback from the mentors on my asking of that question. I had them rank the core classes, so theology, math, English, and science in their preference, and then list different electives that they love or that they hate. And I did ask for some specific feedback on if there were teachers that they just really couldn't see themselves being able to support to the ability that they would like to. Another key piece in that application is I judged their level of interest. If a student wasn't still excited about being in the class and still very interested in signing up for this year-long commitment, then I wanted to give them that out. I think that's important and something that I continued to provide for them as we move through before implementation. I also began creating the student materials, so our syllabus, what the assignments would look like, how would we communicate when they're in a classroom, but I'm not there with them, and then the miscellaneous forms such as confidentiality. Again, all of these are linked on the website for you. This was also the phase where I was communicating out to those prospective mentors. So I looked at the registration that was done in the early spring, just after winter break, and sent out those applications to our interested mentors. Again, I ensured those orientation dates were listed. There was a list of expectations within that, so they knew what they were getting into. And then again, that opportunity to opt out. If they were no longer interested, I wanted to know that ahead of time and let them be able to pick a different elective to cover that course, but also be able to schedule on my end accordingly. And then the collaboration piece, we really implemented the specifics of our orientation and pieces that were going to be used once we started our course up in the fall. So I put the orientation dates on the school calendar. We looked to make sure that the future year's course catalog was updated, and then started to discuss the potential placement needs with families and faculty. So going back to those prospective students that I knew were coming into the fall, I typically already have a copy of any sort of plan they have in place and are really able to start, distinguishing who may need more support than others. So starting to look at the needs there. So now we're in the summer, which is about 30 to 90 days out from implementation, and that fall semester starting. And we really look to finalize a lot of our details. So we're creating the orientation schedule and materials. That is a link that I've also provided for you just as kind of a guide and an idea of how I utilized our orientation this year, knowing that it was a COVID year. So I'll speak to that a little bit later on how I hope for that to look in future years. I also created our Google Classroom, or if you have any other platforms for communication. I also created the acceptance letter. So I provided the peer mentors with a congratulations. It was a big deal for them to get into this course. They had to really think about it, apply for it, give that teacher recommendation and receive good feedback from their teachers, and then be able to have it work into their schedule. So in that acceptance letter, I again provided the orientation dates, the different expectations of being at that orientation and what that may mean for them in those final days of the summer. And then also that one last final chance to opt out. Communication's pretty minimal at this point. Just really getting that acceptance letter to the mentors was my key piece. So I mailed them, but also emailed them. So I ensured that they had it in one way or the other. And then with collaboration, I had really high hopes of having a kind of a mini retreat with our peer mentors for our orientation. And so I brought in, or I was hoping to bring in, a lot of presentations from our campus minister, some outside organizations, and then had even set up some time for our families to come in and provide some specific questions and answers for some of our higher needs students. Since we were on a COVID year, my collaboration did look a little bit different. I still had a lot of communication and discussion with our outside organizations, with our campus minister, and with our families. The biggest piece was with our families because I wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for them to tell the peer mentors about their child, for their student to actually be able to introduce themselves and offer some of their own insight into how they learn best. So we did that this year with some video messages and introductions. I also had a student write an email to the peer mentors describing how he works best. I asked if they wanted to share about their diagnoses and provide any photos or work samples that I could share with the peer mentors. And again, there's items on the website if you wanted to see how that looked. It's fall 2020. We're getting geared up for our orientation to start, and then we'll be implementing our peer mentor course for the first time with our students in our fall semester. It was a really exciting time, but there was still a lot of work to be done to be ready for orientation. The majority of that was creating the schedules and placements for our mentors. So I initially looked at the scheduling of my students who would need the highest support. So knowing that, we have some students that are about third, fourth grade level in reading and in math. So where were their reading and math classes scheduled throughout their day, and how many supports would I need in each of those classrooms if they were in different areas of the school at the same time? So I looked to really find the placements that would work best for the peers and the mentors. I based my mentors placement off of the hour they were available to help me. So the peer mentor course was an hour of their day, just like any of their other courses. And then I looked to what they had distinguished as some of their highest interest courses and tried to link them that way. I also had to get teacher information for the courses, and I provided this to the mentors on a document that had the Google Classroom codes. We started back hybrid for 2 weeks before we came back full person. And so I really wanted to make sure that before classes started on that first day, if they were at home due to our hybrid placement, that they would have the Google Classroom code to be able to communicate and be a support to their students. So while gathering that Google Classroom information, I was also communicating to faculty about their placements. Again, I made it a big deal. I said, congratulations, you have a peer mentor to support your class. We are so excited for you. And laid out the expectations that I had for the peer mentors so that they didn't feel like it was one more thing they had to coordinate or be in charge of. Really is a collaboration between the peer mentors and our faculty, and I didn't want them to feel like they had to be an authoritative figure for our peer mentors while also trying to support the class that they were teaching at that time. So I did this through a few ways. I talked about it at our professional development days with our faculty, but I also sent out an email specifically to each of the classroom teachers who would have a peer mentor in their class for whatever hour of the day. There's a link to that email for you too on the website. And then the collaboration piece was probably my most exciting and the piece that I enjoyed the most over orientation. This was a lot with the mentors. We did everything together. So we did a really interactive orientation because I didn't want to get up there and just preach. I wanted the kids to really fully understand different learning styles, different diagnosis, different ways that they could be of support, but also be able to ask the questions and identify areas that maybe we needed to touch base on a little bit closer during that time we had in those 2 days. So when you go to the website and you look at the orientation schedule, you can kind of see how I planned it out and how I had the mentors really working together in small groups to teach me what they could figure out on diagnosis and learning styles and ways to be the best support they could. I had the peer mentors record video introductions to their peers so that I could send those back out to the families who had sent me a recording of their student. Again, I wanted it to be face-to-face. We had plans of having a luncheon, getting to know you activity afternoon with the peers and the mentors, but unfortunately with COVID, that wasn't able to happen. So we went with a video introduction instead, and it worked out really well. I also asked the peer mentors to design a t-shirt or sweatshirt or a mask logo for us. That's something that I think is really beneficial for them feeling like they are a part of something outside of just being a course. So, your sports teams have certain sweatshirts, your drama clubs have sweatshirts, your Campus ministry team has sweatshirts or masks or t-shirts, so why not our peer mentors? And then we also talked about different social events that we could hopefully get to be able to attend together. That was a part of my peer mentors' expectations. We're not only there to support academically, but also socially and emotionally. So, where were there social events that we could, as a group, get together? We had hoped to do some tailgates before football games, go and have a dinner before we had a show of one of our theater productions, or even getting together for a holiday party. And then I wanted their feedback on follow-up meetings and trainings. Did they want to try to meet once a week? That's a lot to ask. Did they want biweekly, monthly, quarterly, semesterly? I really wanted them to feel like they had a say in how their program was working for them and be something that they could easily manage. I didn't want them to be overwhelmed. I wanted them to be a support and be able to be there for their peers. And just a note, when you hear me talking about peers versus mentors, our mentors are obviously the students that signed up to be in our program and were accepted as a peer mentor. For peers, I have some peers who really require some one-on-one support, and those were a lot of the family discussions and the hope to getting together for a meet and greet before the year started, and really giving more of that insight into their specific learning needs. But I also have peers that mean every single student in the building. Our peer mentors are in the classroom to support an entire class. They are not there for one-on-one support. In the rare instances they are, it's usually in a pull-out setting in our resource room. So when they are in a classroom, their expectation is to support every single student in that classroom. Maybe there's a few that they're more aware of needing to check in often, or they understand that they maybe need to help them get through some modified work versus what is being instructed to the whole class. However, we're not sitting next to our peers and working one-on-one and really drawing attention to one student or another. They're there to support the whole class, and I think they recognize that and enjoy that, and so do their peers. I wanted to give you some insight into some first year lessons that I learned just by moving through this program, planning it to getting it implemented, and then also being tasked with dealing with COVID. So, pandemics do change your plans. They absolutely do. I've touched on a few of those with, our video introductions versus meet and greets, with being able to have a retreat with presenters, community organizations, families coming in versus having to do it on our own. We've also wanted to do those social events. We haven't been able to do that. We've been really limited as a community to who can attend different games and performances, and we haven't been able to have that social aspect that our peers and our mentors really look forward to and need. We also typically do a service day at our school. Community service is part of graduation requirements. So we had plans of pairing our mentors with some of our higher need peers and being able to even go out and do a service day at our local Down Syndrome Guild. That's something that a few of our peers really have a strong community feel into that organization, and would be something that they would want to support and show their mentors. And then lastly, on non-pandemic years, we do a lot of community-based learning. My mentors were going to be a huge support for that. So I really have high hopes that in future years we can really bring back some of these more social pieces, and be able to really influence our peers in offering more support than just in the classroom. And understanding that word gets out. So those discussions and conversations that were had at our open house for our 7th graders and for our 8th graders coming in as freshmen, word gets around that you're doing something different than the other buildings. And it looks really good for you. We have had a 12% increase in enrollment of students with support plans in the last 2 years. So for us, that has been amazing for our growth as a school and as a identifying factor as a community that is inclusive and welcoming to everyone. And taking the feedback. Feedback is invaluable. Take the good and the bad. Take it, adapt, be flexible, and move forward. Everything in a pandemic year changes. So taking the feedback from students was really valuable to us this year. We started out with daily logs. They had to track everything they did in the class they were supporting on a daily basis. By the end of first semester, it was too much. It was too much on my end to be grading that. It was too much on their end to have to not only support the class, but then go back and track what they were actually doing. So we switched it. We went to weekly logs, and everybody is doing a much better job of getting their information inputted. And I can really tell in their reflections that they're taking the time to think back and how they best supported or where some of the challenges were in that classroom. The feedback from the feedback from mentors was also really insightful in some of our first semester placements. We had a few peer mentors who weren't being utilized to the potential that they had and weren't in the areas where we could really support our students fully. So we switched them. We moved them at semester. It was easy to do. There was no negative feedback from anybody. It worked well in their schedules, and they're much happier. And we see that. We see that in the peers that they're supporting, and we see that in the teachers, and we see that in the mentors. I also wanted to share with you the 3 resources that really proved to be the most valuable planning piece to our peer mentor program. You can see a copy of these here, and they're also linked on the website. I'd also love to collaborate. I have found it very difficult to find other teachers or educators who have been providing support through peer mentors, and I'd love if we could start that community. Here are 2 QR codes, one for a Facebook group that I've started specifically for peer mentors, and then also another way for you to access the website that I have mentioned throughout this presentation. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and taken some inspiration from what we have in place at Bishop Miege. I leave you now with some reflections from our peer mentors and wish you all the luck.
And not only does peer mentoring help other people, like I can help other students with doing their homework or understanding concepts, things like that, but also they kind of help me in a way that I learn just as much as they do. I get a kind of new perspective on other areas of our community that I otherwise wouldn't really have much experience or understanding of.
I've gained new relationships with different students in our school and learned more about the different learning abilities they have. I've learned to not do the work for these students, but to help assist them and be more successful and confident in their own work.
It's so worth it to see the smile on her face when she knows that she can do something on her own. It's just the best feeling in the world.
As you look back to these new freshmen, you get the opportunity to help them with what you struggled with your freshman year. As you kind of remember the anxieties of going to new school, of trying to find somewhere to fit in. And so I'd say the most important part for me being a peer mentor is building this relationship with the kids, getting to know them, remembering their names, helping them figure out where they belong, and also helping them build these relationships with each other.
I became a peer mentor this year to help the lower classmen academically, but not just that, but to build friendships with them and let them know that they can definitely socialize with the upperclassmen.